I'll record on my computer.
Okay.
Yep. So
right.
recording now.
Call the meeting to order at 6:04 p.m. The first order of business is approval of the minutes from the meeting on.
I was going to say, I was going to make the motion to approve.
Okay. Now, so now how this works is that the only people who can approve the minutes are the people who are at that first meeting, guys. Okay, so John, do I have a second?
Yes, you have a second for me.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, seeing no further discussion, I will approve these minutes. Okay, next order of business is public comment. If you are a member of the public.
I think we maybe needed to vote. The people who were present needed to vote on that. I'm sorry.
Sorry, thank you.
I
Let's
think
see. I can't see everyone who was there, so I'm gonna say, okay, John Riley.
Yes.
Chris Parkin.
yes.
Cheryl Graziano.
Yes.
Is Juliet here?
No.
She's not here. Todd Johnson.
Yes.
Gretchen's not here. And myself, I say yes also. So minutes are approved. Okay, now public comment. If there's any members of the public to comment.
And generally, the way we run a public comment, you can raise your hand using the participant window, or you can just wave at us in the video.
Seeing none, committee member comment. I'll make a comment. I want to thank everybody for wanting to do this, and I appreciate your patience. This is a very unwieldy, large group, and I'm really looking forward to doing some exciting work with all of you. Okay, any other committee member comment?
I just want to say the same. My name is Susan, and I'm just like over the moon about this. I'm so excited, and I cannot wait to work together, learn from each other, and make our community an even better place.
Awesome. Any other community member comment? Okay. So discussion and possible action, the overview of the charge and framework discussion of the Task Force on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And to that, I am turning it over. Oh, we were going to do introductions first, right? Okay, so we were going to, so as I said, you need some patience. We were going to have some small group discussions in breakout rooms, but there's a FOIA issue. So we're going to do, as part of the introductions, a little bit of what we would have done in the breakout rooms, but we're going to have to keep it short because there's so many of us. So I'll call each person as we go around, and you say your name, your affiliation, whether you're, a board member, what town you're from, what school you're from, etc. And a couple sentences about why you wanted to be included in this group. So I'll start. My name is Heather Whaley, and I am a board member of the Reading Board of Education. And I was wanting to do this work because in a nutshell, I noticed there was a huge difference between the sort of inner city public school where my kids went to their early years in elementary school and what they got in Reading. And I thought that there is a lot that we can learn and improve on here. So Dr. Harrison.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Harrison, Rydell Harrison, Superintendent of Schools. So, there's probably two reasons why I'm doing this work. One is because it's part of my job, but I think the more important part is because I think that this is the right work to do. I think that really thinking critically about diversity, equity, and inclusion As educators, it's what we want to do and think about on behalf of our students for thinking about the long term of who is it that we want our young people to be and our community to be. I feel like these are really important issues to think about and spend time working on. And, you know, I think that we could be doing this work just at the school level or just with central office or just with the board. But I think it's really important to have this unified group of different people coming with different perspectives and putting that all the best of our communities together to think about what we want for our students. And so Heather started, she's passing off to me, and I'm going to call on the next person who will then go on, and we'll kind of go from there until everyone is called. So I'm going to call on John Stinson.
Thanks, Rydell. Hi, everybody. John Stinson. I'm the chair of the Easton Board of Education. I have 2 boys in 6th grade at Helen Keller. I was particularly excited to sort of join these efforts. When we look at our enduring goals and sort of aspirations, academic excellence, building a caring community, and cultivating future-ready learners, I think that sort of middle one, sandwiched between those very important goals, is the one that I'm really passionate about, building that caring community. And I think that means building a community that cares about the advancement of all. And I'm excited to do my part to help with that. Heather, do you want to direct to the next? I don't.
No,
I don't
you pick who goes next.
Okay. I'll just go across my row. The only person on the top row that I see who hasn't spoken yet is Cheryl.
Take myself on mute. Hi, I'm Cheryl Graziano. I'm the vice chair of the Region 9 Board of Education, oversees Barlow, and really engaged, or I found this work to be very important, not just for our schools, not just for our high schools, but for all of our schools within both Reading and Easton, and certainly something that, as an elected board member, our constituents had asked for over the summer, given what's going on with you know, the United States and our political climate, as well as our just really how our demographic is changing over time. And I think this is something that is very proactive approach in terms of making sure that our education reflects the diversity of our country. So thank you. I'm happy to be part of the group.
Now
Cheryl, you got to pick who goes next.
You have to pick the next person.
Tag.
Who do I
it's tag.
see online? I see Darlene Wallen in my block, so I'm picking Darlene. Hi, Darlene.
There we go. I finally got it. Sorry. Hi, I'm Darlene Mullen. I'm the assistant principal at John Reed in Reading. I was interested in this work partly because I want to learn more. I feel like I don't know enough, and I need to make sure that I can help with the curriculum that needs to be changed, with some of the hiring practices that we need to look at. So just in my position, I felt like this is important work for me to become more familiar with and to be a part of. So thank you. Stephanie.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Stephanie Pearson-Ugal. I am the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction in all 3 districts. And in addition to this focus being a part of my work, I'm so excited for the shared commitment and the cohesive directional focus that includes all 3 districts, because I think if we're going to do this work well, having this collaborative group together, sort of charged with the strategic nature of this work, will help to inform so much of our work in central office in all 3 districts. And so I'm so excited about the work that we are embarking on together. And with that, I will pass the baton to Devin.
Great, thank you. I'm Devin Weibel. I'm a member of the Easton Board of Education. I'm very excited to be part of this task force. I really think it's important that we develop a racial and social conscious in all of our students, faculty, and community members, so that we recognize the value of every person within our community, both inside of Easton, Reading, ER9, but outside as well. And then we also recognize the privilege and power that we have and use that as a power for good to improve the greater society around us. And with that, I will pass it to Amanda.
Hi, I'm Amanda Weaver. I have students in Reading School at Joel Barlow as well as RES. I have no history with schools and helping on boards, but I am the head of a global CPG company for human resources. And in the past 10 years, I've had a focus on diversity and inclusion, really focusing on female diversity, minority diversity, and LGBTQ. I have a strong background in policy and all the unfun stuff in making sure that everything is equitable as we write out even verbiage and job descriptions for the staffing and so forth. So I'm excited to be part of it. I'm super passionate about it. And I want to make sure that my kids are in the environment where we're all making a difference. So I'm super excited. Thank you. Oh, I'll pass to Natasha because she's one of the only people I know on here.
Well, I'm Natasha Heslin, and I think the good thing about being on this task force is being able to educate myself further on the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also being able to, with the information taken from this, to educate like my peers and even my family itself.
Natasha's the representative from John Reed.
Oh yeah, sorry.
All right, now you get to pick.
The only other person I know is Mr. Riley. So, yeah.
Thank you, Natasha. That was a great job. Thank you. I'm John Riley on the Reading Board of Education. I have two daughters, one in 4th grade and one in 6th grade. And I'm excited to be involved in this group. I think that there are a number of key areas in which this task force can work to improve our curriculum, our human resources, and also to attract other families to Reading and to Easton based on the changes that we're able to make here. We've all seen a lot of influx of people moving in. I think I got 3 Brooklynites in my 30 houses on my street just in the last 6 months here. We really want to work to attract families from outside to come to Easton and Reading. But more importantly, I just want to make sure that all students feel included, whether they're reading a text or doing a science lesson, that they see that there are people who look like them, act like them, and then that's incorporated into their learning each day. And I will go through the list here, and I'm going to pick on Christopher Parkin.
Yeah, I know you, John. So I'm Chris Parkin. I'm the chair of the Reading Board of Education, and I think that this is important work for a variety of reasons, including that we talk a lot about educating the whole child, and I think that we often overlook some aspects of what the whole child means, and so this is important work in making sure that we're putting our money where our mouth is with that. And over the past 9 months, as everybody has suddenly had to work and live remotely, issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion have obviously been a part of every facet of school governance over that time. And so it just needs to be the lens through which we see things. And so this is an important way to make sure that we're keeping that approach on the work that we're doing here. So I will call on Kelly Blessy.
Hello, Kelly Blessy. I teach 2nd grade at Reading Elementary School. I have been doing this work individually for a number of years now. I recognize it to be insufficient, and I am gladly looking for a way to reach out and not only extend my ability to grow and learn independently, individually, so that I can then support my learners, but also to support the other teachers and staff in my school building. Having been there for 25 years, I've seen a lot of change over time, and there's a lot more that we can impart. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And I am going to invite one of my most fabulous parents, B, to be next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Beatrix Erickson. And I'm blessed this year, as in my previous year, to have a fantastic teachers for my kids. So I have my husband and I live in Reading. We kind of joke that we're sort of like our own little UN. in that I was born and raised in Haiti. My husband's from Norway, and we're raising 2 biracial kids in Reading. One who looks 100% Caucasian, except for the attitude. She's got her mama's attitude. And the other who's mixed. So for me, obviously, I'm very excited about this work. I want to make sure that my kids are in a safe environment. But I will tell you that, my heart, for obvious reasons, are in this. And my number one priority and focus in all things that we do is what is the message that's being conveyed to the children, to our kids. And in terms, it's not just that we're identifying things, it's how is it being presented. I will tell you that I realized, the middle school last year, my son's in the 6th grade, my daughter's in the 2nd grade in Miss Bussey's class. Last year, I know that the middle school wanted to do a program, and I was one of the parents who said, absolutely, I would not have my child in that program. To me, the message that's conveyed to my kids is my number one priority as a parent. And I am just a heads up, very dogged about that. So, because it's not enough to do a program. We have to look at what's the takeaway? How does my child, being one of the only people of color most of the time in his class, feel when these topics are being covered? I remember as a kid growing up, I hated February, the month of February. I absolutely hated it because I felt like a negative light was shown because it was done on checklists. So to me, I will be looking for the heart and the spirit and the message of what's communicated, not just to the community, but also to our, to kids of color and other groups. And I have to pass it. Oh, next person, please. I can't see. Who do I pass it on to? Who hasn't? Natasha Heslin, have you spoken yet? She has? Oh, come on.
How about Jennifer Neal?
Yay. I co-sign.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Neal. I'm a parent of a 10th grader and an 8th grader. My 10th grader goes to Philadelphia Aerospace School, and then my 8th grader is at John Reed. I feel like I can't really say anything other than what people have already said. I am really excited about this. I'm really interested in where everybody feels well.
I think we lost Jennifer.
Yeah, Jennifer, I don't know if you can still hear us, but we lost. No, wait, she's in the waiting room.
Coming back, yeah. Maybe.
Back. Can you hear us? Uh-oh.
Maybe that famous Easton Reading Wi-Fi.
Jennifer, all right, we can come back to Jennifer. Let's see who, how about Rebecca?
I'm back. I finished. Okay.
Okay, sorry. No. Where did she go? Oh, there you are. Jennifer, did you want to finish? We lost you halfway through.
I
don't know what's going on.
Maybe we'll give Rebecca a chance to say hello.
Yeah.
Welcome.
All right. Hi, I'm Rebecca Saron. I'm a special ed teacher and assistant at Barlow, and I was interested in this because I've always been passionate about educating myself on social justice issues like my whole life, and I just want to learn more, but also like recognize that schools are like a great place to introduce kids to these type of issues. And Susan hasn't gone, I don't think.
Thank you. Hi, Susan Falzoni. I'm an Easton resident. I've been here for about 7 years, and I have 2 kids, 3 and 6 years old, one in Samuel Staples. And what interested me in this group, I've been talking about a group like this for like the past year. So when it actually came in my email box, I was ecstatic that it's already been formed and it's ready to go. So I'm an advocate for LGBTQ community, and I've been doing work in the area for the last couple of years. So I'm extremely passionate about that and excited to bring more of that education into the school system and community. I personally have a family member that's in the LGBTQ community, and it just made me so aware of how much is not known, and how many things were just taken for granted when you're not in a smaller group of people, in these smaller niches of communities that just daily conversation, everything, how much it impacts, especially children. So I'm excited to get deeper into that and other social issues, and just learn and grow together and help make change. So thank you so much for having me be part of this group. It means a lot. I don't know if anybody hasn't gone. Everybody on my screen has.
I think Amelia and Julia.
And Jennifer, did you finish? I don't think we finished.
Was that me, Jennifer?
Yeah, did you, because you got cut off halfway through.
I don't know. I don't know where I got cut off. I'm at work and our Wi-Fi was working all fine all day. So did you hear I'm from Reading, have 2 children. And I'm just really excited to be a part of this group.
Awesome. Did you want to pick who goes next? We have, who hasn't gone? Amelia, Dana, Todd, Julia. I don't know if Julia fixed did you fix your audio?
Yeah, it's working now.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Julia, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Julia Johnson. I'm in 8th grade at Helen Keller Middle School in Easton. And I just wanted to join because I've been in this county for a long time. And I just feel like there's a lack of DEI. Like I'm one of the only students of color in my grade, and it's just not talked about a lot. In 5th grade, when we were learning about American history, there was like 1 page on slavery and that was it. And I feel like that's a really big part of our history that nobody ever talks about. And I just don't think that anybody's willing to have the difficult conversations, and that those conversations are the most important ones to have, and we're not having them. And that's just something that we need right now, especially right now. And just like teaching people how to communicate in a respectful way that values everybody's identity and everyone's ideas. And that's not a strong suit of this district. So I wanna help change that for me and for other people like me in this district.
Julie, did you want to pick who goes next? We have Dana and Amelia. Who else? Is there anybody else? I think that's
Todd.
And Todd.
Okay, Dana.
How did I know that was coming, Julia? I'm Dana Ponte. I'm the literacy specialist at Helen Keller, and I'm excited for this work. As Julia said, we need more of it in our schools. I also personally have 2 children that are of mix, so I think it's important conversations, and it's time. I'm excited. Todd.
Hi, I'm Todd Johnston. I am the chair for the Region 9 Board of Education, and I have a daughter that graduated from Barlow's first year at university. I have a son as a senior at Barlow. a son that's a 7th grader at Keller, and another son is a 5th grader at Staples, and my wife's a pre-K teacher in Easton. So I've got the whole educational range covered, which leads to very interesting dinner conversations. We just had one this past weekend around gender and pronouns that was very informative, and I learned a lot from my college student that was back. So I'm looking forward to this work to see what we can do across all the grade levels in our 2 towns and with the people in the community, and just make people more informed to have better conversations and learn. And who is left?
Amelia, maybe?
Amelia.
Amelia? I think Amelia? Yeah, go ahead, Amelia.
Hi, I'm Amelia Macri. I'm a junior at Joel Barlow High School, and I wanted to join this committee specifically because both at school and in my line of work, I've liked to stay involved in my community, and especially being a part of the LGBT community, I've seen a lot of inequality and injustice that I feel should be addressed at some point, and I thought that it would be important to put my voice out there.
Oh my gosh, did we get everyone? Wow, good work. Okay, so moving on is the overview of the charge and framework discussion. And I'm going to pass that over to Dr. Harrison.
All right, so I am sharing my screen. Can everyone see that? So I want to just start by saying again how excited I am to have all of you as part of this committee and to be a part of this work. You know, I think that as our chair, Heather is really passionate and really excited. I think in talking through the planning, what we wanted to accomplish tonight, there was a lot of excitement just around, you know, getting the work off the ground and really diving into the work that we know is really important for our young people. Not just for, not just for the young people who are in our classes now, but really thinking long-term. And so tonight, I just want to take a few minutes and go through our diversity, equity, inclusion framework. And just talk a little bit about this task force. So this DEI task force was established and was given a charge to advise the district, advise all of our administrators, and really give direction towards the work of DEI related to these areas. So looking at professional learning, programming, enrollment, student engagement, community engagement, hiring practices, curriculum, policies. And so those were kind of the initial charge for the task force. With a real clear understanding that this task force or this committee shall conduct an annual assessment on the state of equity, diversity, and inclusion and report to the boards. That we will hold regularly scheduled meetings, establish multi-year goals, identify and recommend appropriate sources of funding for equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so shortly after coming to the district, I wanted to build off of this work and think about you know, from a school district perspective or a tri-district perspective, finding a framework that would really hold all of this work together. And so I adopted this or adapted this framework by this researcher, Kumashiro, to hold all of our DEI work together, focused on 4 different areas. So looking at governance and finance, teaching and learning, faculty and staff, partnerships and public impact. And you can see how this task force is really designed in such a way that we have people who are able to speak to all of these areas in really meaningful ways and be able to not just talk about where we currently are, but also to be able to envision what a future could look like for us related to these areas. And so this framework really comes with 3 different sort of task or this 3-phase model that's adapted by from the work of the EDC. And so the first is reviewing our assets and challenges. And so looking at these 4 areas across our district, what are the things that we're already doing well? What are some strengths that we have related to these areas? And then what are some challenge areas? Then the second piece is developing a theory of action. And that's really, a theory of action takes, sort of what we know about change and organizational change and marries it to, here's what the research says around this piece. So this will bring us as a task force, it will be some opportunities for us to grow and learn, to hear about what some of the research, current research says around these areas, and develop a theory of action. A theory of action basically says, if we do these things, then here's what we expect our outcomes to be. And that theory of action is really glides right into level 3, and that is to develop and implement a plan. And so we talked about this task force being developing multi-year goals. And so we want to develop and implement a plan for how we address some of these areas, and recognizing that it really is a continuous improvement approach, that there's never a day that we'll say, all right, we could check all of this off the list. We did it all. We're perfect. But that we're continuing to grow and to really develop a diversity and equity and inclusion lens that really guides all the work that we're doing across all of our districts and all of our schools. I do want to just take a moment and say that while this work is happening with the task force, there's also work happening at the school level. So just today, for instance, the Joel Barlow High School staff, they did professional learning for their whole staff around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that work is growing out of an advisory council that they have created by their administration, but it's students and staff kind of working and focusing on DEI specifically at the high school. And so we'll see that, that this work is not just work that's happening with the task force through this framework, but that we're also continuing moving this work forward at the individual building level. And so I'm really excited that we'll be able to see that happening concurrently. And so what I did was then I took those 8 areas that were kind of the focus areas for the DEI task force and aligned them to these 4 areas of the framework. So you can see how policies and enrollment guidelines, those things really lend themselves to governance and finance. Looking at curriculum choices and student engagement really connects to teaching and learning. With faculty and staff, we want to look at 2 areas, of course, the professional learning, how we're growing our staff, but also looking at how we're attracting, hiring, and retaining staff. And then from the community standpoint, really looking at our overall programming and community engagement as connected to the partnerships and public impact. And John mentioned this kind of at the during his comments at the earlier in the meeting, really aligning this work to our enduring goals and aspirations. We talk about these ABC goals and aspirations. So looking at academic excellence, building a caring community, and cultivating future-ready learners. And you can really see the connections of this DEI work to all 3 of these areas. But as John mentioned, really particularly to when we're thinking about building a caring community. And so, this task force really represents this idea of building a caring community, because we're not just talking about our students or our staff, but we're also talking about connecting with our parents and our community members and really thinking about how we advance this, this work for all members of our community, even beyond the schools. And so with that, I am going to just take a moment and see if there are any questions related to the framework. And that's just sort of a rough explanation of the framework and kind of how we'll organize the work. And then we'll dig in deeper once we start thinking about what some of our next steps are. Any questions?
I have a question right now. This is Cheryl. Thank you for laying that out. Very, very helpful. I noticed on your chart or that last slide, there was curriculum within the schools and then overall programming as it gets to larger community. is there some coordination or overlap with the material that might be covered in either category?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we'll see is that there'll be a lot of connections across the categories, right? So you could think about curriculum choices that we make would have a direct impact on professional learning that's needed, and then really could think about what community programming looks like. So I think that there'll be some nice overlap across the areas, but I think it's still a good way to just kind of start to organize some of the thinking.
Okay, thanks.
Great question. Any other questions? Heather, do you want me to continue on talking about the vocabulary? Essential
Yeah,
vocabulary?
because this is when we were going to go into this breakout rooms.
Yep. So the next piece I want to talk about is, you know, I've done this kind of equity work a bunch of times in a lot of different districts, both as a person who was working in that district, but then also as a person kind of coming in as a consultant. And one of the things that I find is so helpful and impactful for this work is to really dig into essential vocabulary. And so when we talk about these issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion so often, and a lot of times we assume that we all mean the same thing. So I think it's really important for us as a task force to have some agreements on some definitions. And so this is kind of a proposal of, you know, sort of my thinking, but I'm willing to, you know, to get some additional feedback from folks. And then also to see, you know, this is a list of terms that we would then add to as we continue doing this work. I think this is really important for us as a community to be able to say to people, you know, this is some of the work that we're doing. And when we talk about diversity, this is really what we mean. So I'm going to just take some time and go through a couple of slides based on this essential vocabulary. I don't want to just read to everyone. And so I'll try to just lift out some highlights from each. These first three though, diversity, equity, and inclusion, I actually do want to just spend a little time on those because this is really what our whole kind of task force is about. So diversity is really looking at the different ways in which people identify, that they and looking at the ways in which people differ. So thinking about their psychological, physical, social differences that occur among all individuals, specifically looking at race and ethnicity, nationality, socioeconomic status, religion, economic class, education, age, gender, sexual orientation, marital status, mental and physical ability, and also learning styles. That diversity is all inclusive and supportive of this idea that everyone and every group should be valued. And so I think that that word valued really connects with when we're talking about diversity. It's just not meaning that, you know, other groups of people are there, but that their experiences are valued. It's also about understanding these differences and moving beyond simple tolerance to embracing and celebrating the rich dimensions of our differences. When we're looking at equity and we're talking about equity, this is really ensuring that all individuals are provided the resources they need to have access to the same opportunities as the general population. I think one area that we all really understand equity is when it comes to education is with special ed programming. So we recognize that there are some students who may get some additional courses or some additional instruction in order for them to access the curriculum that everyone else is accessing. And so equity is really focusing on people getting what they need. And so equality is very different because equality is really everyone getting the same thing. So everything is evenly distributed among all people. Equality is the condition where everyone is treated the same way, everyone is granted the same rights and responsibilities, regardless of their individual differences. These two things are both obviously very important. But specifically, we talk about equity because we recognize that based on the way that people identify, based on kind of historical experiences, not all needs are created equally. And so we want to take an equity approach to the work that we do with our students and with our staff and with schools, because we want to be focused on making sure everyone has what they need. And then the last under these kind of three big areas is around inclusion. And so I love this definition: authentically bringing traditionally excluded individuals and or groups into the processes, activities, and decision-making in a way that shares power. So inclusion is not just about having additional people at the table, but it's really about sharing in the decision-making and the policy-making. And so I think this task force is intentionally inclusive in that we are including students. And so students, you are on members of this task force, and you have the same power to vote, just like every other member that's a part of the task force. Your opinions are just as important as all of the adults. And that's really what inclusion is. And it's really thinking about how we bring people to the table who have traditionally been left out of discussions, and make sure that we are sharing that power in decision-making. Any questions on any of these three?
Rydell or Dr. Harrison, and maybe we're going to get into it with additional vocabulary, but for diversity, the definition including the sort of part about embracing and celebrating rich dimensions of our differences. How do we think about that while also making sure that we're not getting into appropriation?
Yes.
Do we think? I mean, and I don't know if there's a sort of deeper level of vocabulary we're going to get into later, but just thought.
So we may cover that in some of the additional vocabulary today, but I will say that just in my experience, I think that that's the benefit of talking about these three pieces together, right? So I think that in the past, in education, there was a focus on diversity, but not really thinking about equity and inclusion. And so then you get into, oh, we're just going to have Hispanic Day, and then we're going to just eat Hispanic food, or right, which is not really talking about how you value the rich dimensions of the differences, because that's not a once a year celebration. And so I think that the focus on equity and inclusion also helps to round out that conversation, and you think about what that looks like from a more meaningful standpoint. Cultural appropriation is one of the terms that I have on our larger list. So I wanted to start tonight with the shorter list and then kind of loop back to that, if that makes any sense.
It does. Thank you.
I greatly appreciate the differentiation between equity and equality. And I think that's going to be really key for a lot of the work that we're going to be doing.
Great. Can you guys still see if I just have my screen like this?
I can.
Yeah.
Thank you. I really get frustrated when I can't see people that I'm talking to.
The only thing I would say is that there's kind of this new, or probably not that new, talk of like moving from equity to justice, where you like equity, you're still adding, you're still creating a way that things are equitable, and hopefully moving to a place where those barriers are no longer present at all, and you no longer need to continue to create spaces that are equitable, so that you've actually created justice. So moving through equity.
Yes. So 100%. I think that that's a huge part of this discussion. So justice is one of the key terms that I have kind of coming for the future. And really, it's the continuum from equality, from equality to equity to justice. And then there's a fourth category that I've worked in around transformation. And so I think that you know, as a district, when we think about this work, kind of over a long period of time, we want to think about ways that we could kind of move across that continuum. So I'm going to go on to the next slide, but I am trying to figure out how to see all of you. Again, hang on, I'll reshare in just a second.
If you share your whole screen, then you can.
Yep.
Yep.
All right, can you guys see that? I know it's a little cut off. All right. So these next three, bias, marginalized, or marginalization and oppression, these are words that come up a lot in many of these discussions. And so I just wanted to take a couple of moments to unpack them. So bias, looking at negative associations expressed automatically that people unknowingly hold. And so we refer to this as unconscious or hidden or implicit bias. And it's just, you know, these preconceived notions that you have about people. And one thing that's really important to note is that there have been a lot of studies around implicit biases and how these biases impact our own personal attitudes and actions. And so even though it's sort of in our minds, it actually creates real world issues because those biases then impact the way that we make decisions. And I think that the other piece that is really critical in this work is that implicit biases have also been shown to be present for people who we state that we have commitments to equity and fairness, but that doesn't mean that the biases automatically go away. That it's something that you always have to be working on and thinking about the ways that it impacts your focus on this work. Then there's marginalization. And so the process by which minority groups or cultures are excluded or ignored or kind of moved to the outer edges of society. These are tactics that are used to devalue those that vary from the norm of mainstream. And so when we're talking about inclusion and diversity and equity, we're often talking about marginalized groups of people based on their identities. And then a word that we often talk about is around oppression and systemic oppression in particular. So we're looking at the systemic and pervasive nature of social inequality. And this is really woven through our social institutions and embedded within our individual consciousness. So, you know, I don't think I think that one way to understand this is that it's not like people are waking up to every morning and say, you know, let me take count of how many people I can oppress today, but it's really about looking at the institutional and systemic discrimination along with our own personal biases, bigotry, social prejudice, and it then creates this complex web of structures that really impact our larger society. And so oppression also signifies a hierarchical relationship in which dominant groups or privileged groups benefit from some things, often in unconscious ways, and we'll talk about this a little bit later with one of the other terms, but there are benefits for majority groups and disempowerment for minority groups or subordinated groups. Before I get into the isms, so there are two slides of several isms that I think inform our work as a DEI task force. Are there any questions on bias, marginalization, or oppression? All right, I'll press on. So ableism, anti-Semitism, classicism, and discrimination. So ableism, obviously, you know, thinking about prejudice thoughts or discriminatory actions based on differences in ability. And so whether that's physical, mental, or emotional ability, and that this also contributes to a system of oppression, usually of able-bodied blind persons against people with illness or disabilities. I think that when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're also thinking about ability. And so I think that some of these isms really speak to sort of the broader work of what we're thinking about with this work. Anti-Semitism, again, this is looking at discrimination or hostility or oppression against Jewish people as a group or as individuals. Classicism, this same kind of connection of discrimination or discriminatory actions, but this time based on difference in socioeconomic status and income, usually referred to as class. And a lot of times this is differential treatment based on the perception of what you think someone's social class is, not necessarily what it is. And then all of these are really just related to discrimination, which is the unequal treatment of members of a various group based on race, gender, social class, sexual orientation, physical ability, religion, national origin, age, physical, mental abilities, and other categories that may result in differences in their ability to get goods or services or opportunities.
Right, Del? Was it a conscious choice to only include perception in one of these? Sort of perceived social class, but not necessarily perceived physical or mental ability, for example?
It was not a conscious decision. And Chris, I think that one of the things that I think sort of separates classism from others, and this is just sort of my thinking, is that many of these are identity categories that people self-identify. So if a person identifies as Jewish, then it's not necessarily anti-Semitism as based on the perception, but often in relationship to the identified or to the named identity, if that makes sense.
I think I'm seeing this through the eyes of somebody who has done a lot of work in the employment discrimination field. And that has led to a lot of folks who bring charges that say, I was discriminated against because somebody thought I was fill in the blank. I'm not actually fill in the blank, but I was discriminated nevertheless.
Yep.
And so that's where it kind of falls into any of these categories can sort of have the same impact.
All right. So I'll go back and edit, and then just so that you know, once our meeting is done, we'll make all of these resources available to all of you, and make sure that we have it posted for the public as well. So heterosexism, prejudice, and racism, and so the individual, societal, cultural, and institutional beliefs and practices that favor heterosexuality and assume that heterosexuality is the only natural, normal, or acceptable sexual orientation. This creates an imbalance in power, which leads to systemic, institutional, pervasive, and routine mistreatment of LGBTQI people. Prejudice, prejudgment, or unjustifiable, usually a negative attitude of one type of individual or groups towards another group and its members. Such attitudes or negative attitudes are typically based on unsupported generalizations or stereotype that really deny the individual members of these groups to be recognized and treated as individuals with individual characteristics. So prejudice, you sort of get lumped in to different identity groups. And then racism, so the term racism specifically refers to individual, cultural, institutional, and systemic ways by which differential consequences are created for different racial groups. Racism is often grounded in a presumed superiority of the white race over groups historically or currently defined as non-white, institutionalized or organizations as non-white. I'm sorry, there's a missing piece there. Oh no, I skipped a line. Institutional racism, also known as systemic or structural racism, refers to forms of racism that are ingrained in society or organizations. It's when entire racial groups are discriminated against or consistently disadvantaged by larger social systems, practices, choices, or policies. And so one thing I would say about these isms, the isms function on two different levels. There's sort of your individual actions, whether a person individually is racist or heterosexist, for instance. And then there's the systemic nature of that is sort of ingrained in our systems and institutions, and kind of recreate those experiences for people of color or for people from whatever that the identity group is. And those outcomes or that negative treatment happens whether or not people are well-intentioned or mean for it to happen, because it's built into the institution. And so I think that, as we get further into this work and think about the impacts at our schools and with our students, I think we'll always want to be thinking about these isms from the perspective of what's the personal function or what's the personal impact in individual choices and behavior, but then what's sort of the systemic impact of this. And I think that our framework really helps us to think about both of those, with the focus being more at the institutional level, which I think is really important. And it's nice to see some work happening kind of at the personal level with the work in our schools as well. And then the last is just a couple of other terms that I know are terms that often come up in these discussions that just I thought would be helpful for us to lay some foundation on and lay a foundation, and this is what we mean. So anti-racist, there's a great book by Ibram X. Kendi. If you haven't read it, I would recommend it. It's called How to Be an Anti-Racist. But an anti-racist is a person who identifies and challenges the values, structures, and behaviors that perpetuate systemic racism. And so I think one critical piece here around this term anti-racism or anti-racist, that it's really focusing on systemic racism. And so thinking about a person who's an anti-racist is really focused on at the policy or system level, thinking about ways that they could have an impact that changes outcomes for people of color, and not just thinking about, personally how I treat other people. So there's color blindness, the racial ideology that basically says that the best way to end discrimination is by treating individuals as equally as possible. Again, that goes back to the equity versus equality, but treating people as equally as possible without regard to race, culture, or ethnicity. The term colorblind de-emphasizes or ignores race and ethnicity, which is a large part of a person's identity. So, as a person of color, I don't want people to see me as race neutral. I want people to see me as Black, because that really is a huge part of my identity as a person. And so to be colorblind really is not really looking at a part of my identity that is really important to me. And I think that that it's one of the arguments that you often hear come up in conversations about race, particularly when you're talking about younger people and students. And I think that I wanted to go ahead and put this out there, because there's a danger in really pushing a colorblind focus, particularly with working with young people. Privilege is an unearned or sustained advantage that comes from race, gender, sexuality, abilities, socioeconomic status, age, and other differences. Privilege tends to be invisible to those who possess it because its absence or lack of privilege is what actually calls attention to it. You know, I think that many of us fall into identity groups that you can, as a person of color. So I am not in a person who benefits from race privilege, but I am a male. And so, you know, from a gender standpoint, there's a privilege that historically is given to me as a male based on what we understand about gender, the history of gender issues in our society. And so privilege really kind of speaks to that area. We talk about it typically in conversations around white privilege, but I think it's really important to kind of unpack it in all areas. And then the last term that I have just in relationship for tonight's discussion is around white supremacy. And so it's historically, white supremacy is a historically based, institutionally perpetuated system of exploitation and oppression of continents, nations, people of color by white people and nations of the European continent for the purpose of maintaining and defending a system of wealth, power, and privilege. And so you see a lot of connection between systemic racism or systemic oppression and white supremacy. And so I think that these are all such important vocabulary words because for many people who haven't spent a lot of time doing this work or thinking through these things, these words can, you know, really make people be defensive, and they could be conversation stoppers, right? Because, you know, nobody wants to be a white supremacist. And nobody wants to be, you know, everybody wants to be anti-racist. Nobody wants to think that they might, you know, be heterosexist. And so all of these things. And so it's so important for us, I think, as a group, as a task force, to model for other folks in our community and for this work happening at the school level, that to be willing to lean into some of the discomfort that we feel when some of these vocabulary words come up, but then also be empowered enough to say, no, when we talk about privilege, this is really what we mean, and to be able to have a clear understanding. Are there any questions or comments? I'm sure that we could think about other terms that we would like to see adding to this list, or things that we haven't thought about that we should think about. So I'm going to stop sharing, and Beatrix, I think I saw your hand raised. And before you say something, so I met Beatrix at a PTA meeting in Reading, and she mentioned that we had a UNC connection. Just want to clarify, I'm not a Tar Heel fan. I saw you had on a Tar Heel hat at that meeting, and so just wanted to clarify that, you know, that is the wrong color blue. Yeah.
It wasn't me. It wasn't me.
You didn't have, that wasn't you.
We have not met.
Okay. All right. Well, then I got to find out who it was. And I thought it was you. I was planning on giving you a hard time all day about tonight.
Nope. On the issue, what I wanted to say is on the issue of color blindness, your definition said it ignores or de-emphasizes one's ethnicity. And I just wanted to really stress, because my family and I have been living this the last, you know, couple of years. It's not just that it ignores or de-emphasizes, but rather color blindness denies. And the reason that I feel that word is so necessary in this definition is then all of a sudden a situation happens, and as a person of color, I start to speak up, and it's almost like you've never, like, it's almost like it's forcing them to see my color. And that creates some very uncomfortable conversations. And I don't mind sharing with you all, relationships have ended over this past summer. So I just felt like that word was necessary as part of that definition. That's it.
Thank you. Kelly?
Perhaps a suggestion for an additional word, because it encompasses and integrates all of them, that newer term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, intersectionality, how none of these groups are viewed as a monolith, and you can be a person of color and also be part of the LGBTQ plus community, and that each individual, despite their associations, can be a part of multiple groups.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's actually on also on my list of next terms. I just thought, like, oh my God, I don't want to go for, you know, an hour on vocabulary. Like that's not fun for anyone. But thanks, Kelly. That's a really important one to add. Susan?
You probably will be including this as well, but there is, I was wondering where the transgender and non-binary, if that would be listed somewhere in there as well. It falls under a prejudice, you know, group under prejudice, but I think it's important to include as well.
Okay.
I think Devin, were you trying?
I was just going to say that I think the inclusion of colorblindness is, I was kind of echoing what Beatrix said, is so important, because often I've heard people say, we just have to be nice, or we just have to be kind. And you can be kind to someone while taking away their rights or not acknowledging their humanity. And so it's not just being nice or just being kind, it's going deeper and thinking bigger than that. And so, and even on some of the curriculum conversations that have been happening on the curriculum committee, just around whose responsibility is it to teach certain things, and why it's so crucial to have difficult conversations. I think one of the students made such a poignant point about having these difficult conversations and making sure teachers have the ability to, the training to have those conversations in class or outside of class, and how important that is.
Yeah, I agree as well. I feel like the training has to come first, and then, you know, that education is passed on to the students. And it's got to be a community as a whole.
I think of a whole category of terminology that's tied to, I don't know, a sort of historical, like understanding the history, like understanding what Jim Crow is, understanding what white flight was, understanding the Great Migration, understanding these terms as a sort of a broader understanding of sort of where this country is coming from. It feels to me like it's a missing link in a lot of people's sort of basic understanding of these issues, and it without understanding that historical context, I feel like it's very difficult to have a meaningful conversation.
It's a good point, John.
I do have a resource that I'm happy to share after this meeting. I just happened to stumble upon it today. It's through Welcoming Schools, which is a national training organization. And they currently have a list of pre-K to 8th grade books on their website with lesson prompts about them. And it's all related to racism, that educate on anti-Black racism, Black history, skin color, racism experienced with Asian, Latinos, and Indigenous people. And it's free, and it's all on their website. So I'm happy to pass along that information if it's something that you are interested in looking at.
That'd be great. And Susan, if you could send that to me and then also to Heather,
Sure.
then we could share that out.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to be sending everyone like a sort of a recap kind of newsletter kind of thing. So if there's some resource that you want to share, you can feel free to send that to me and I can include that.
Okay.
That goes for everybody.
Any other thoughts, words missing, or just kind of final thoughts, kind of wrapping this idea of making sure we're using common terminology as a baseline for this work moving forward?
And everyone will get a copy of this also. So if you didn't think of something now and you want to bring it up next time or email, that's fine.
All right, so with that, I'll turn it, Heather, back over to you.
Okay, so the next thing on the agenda is public comment. I don't know that we have members of the public who are, but if there's any members of the public who would like to make a comment, raise your hand. And then committee member comment.
I guess I just have more of a question. This is my first time on a task force, so I don't know generally how this works. If you can just kind of fill me in, like behind the scenes, I know we'll meet and have these regular meetings. Is there anything happening, collaborative work outside of these meetings, or how the process works?
So the next thing that's going to happen is I'm going to email everybody what we're calling the exit slip, which will ask a couple of questions. One of them is which of those 4 groups you would be most interested in working in, and also naming one outcome that you hope to achieve. And then from there, we can organize people into groups. And then we have sort of a big picture goals and like a calendar of what we're thinking of, but maybe that's for the next, what do you think, Dr. Harrison, for the next meeting?
Yeah, I actually meant to say that during my comments about the DEI framework. And so I'm just going to share just really quickly. Heather talked about sort of next steps with this work. And, so if we look at the 4 task force areas: governance, finance, teaching and learning, faculty and staff, partnerships and public impact, we really want to get a sense from all of you as committee members or task force members, what's an area that you're most interested in working with. And then part of our next steps is to guide administration or guide our team in the district with doing the equity assessment and really getting that sense of where we are. And so what we'll do is let's say for all of the folks interested in governance and finance, let's generate a list of questions. Like, these are all the questions that we want to know to get a sense of what diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like in relationship to these areas, or these are the data that we would be interested in looking at. And so that's part of the next step. Then in a future meeting, we'll do some use that as an opportunity for some professional development work with us as a task force, and getting a sense of, what does the research say in some of these areas, in order for us to get a sense of what might be some good improvement strategies that we could be focused on, and then developing the plan. And so we really see this process for developing our next steps to kind of starting now in December and then working through monthly meetings to the end of the school year. I think our I can't remember if our timeline was May or June, but at the same time that that's happening, there'll be some broader focus that I'm working with our boards just around strategic planning. And so it'd be really nice to see these two pieces sort of growing and developing together so that our strategic plan is naturally very much informed by the work of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force.
If I can just add one thing, that in one of your early slides, it said that assessing your challenges and your assets. Yeah, review assets and challenges. That would be hearing from the groups in the school, the curriculum committees, for example, that are doing that are also working on this, so that we know what's already happening. And it's also, we would be providing some sort of accountability and oversight for all of that. Any other?
So
I'm seeing everyone.
I have a question. So are we going to work with each individual school for them to come up with their own school committee that we will kind of be liaisons with? Or how, do you know what I mean? Like, so each school for implementation, I guess.
Yeah, so like once our plan is done and then there's implementation, yes. So I think that this task force will continue to be sort of the oversight of implementing that plan at the individual school level. But I also think that it is building on the work that's already happening in some of the schools. So at the same way that this task force grows out of some of the concerns raised kind of in the spring and over the summer, several of our schools have either created their own teams or developed some school-wide goals related to DEI. So there's some of this work already happening. It's really about capitalizing on what that looks like at the school level as well.
Thank you.
Just a follow-up question to that. Once we are assigned to the respective groups, right, is the mechanism, I guess, that this is an oversight function as opposed to a management function per se, right? And there's already governing body over each of the 5 schools, right? So is the actual mechanism of that oversight, is that through connect through each board member, through committees, or do we work with the administrative team? Again, just so there's no overlap, so you don't have, say, the governance and finance committee going to the administrators in the 5 schools and saying, well, what's your progress in X, Y, and Z? So I'm just trying to understand how we drive the accountability over a long period of time, and through which folks.
Yeah, so and we could talk about this more and flesh it out, but my thinking is that it's the central office administration. And so then Dr. Pearson-Ugal, Mr. Zachary, myself, that we're sort of the liaisons from, coming from this task force to as the bridge to what's happening in the individual schools and across the 3 districts.
And then just another follow-up question, and I think this is for Heather and Rydell, with respect to communicating to the overall community. So you mentioned the newsletter and resources, obviously we have once we post the minutes and the materials are going to be posted, is there a more of a proactive communication that's going to be provided to our community, or perhaps through the districts, or maybe perhaps through the towns or anything like that? Or maybe that's something else we need to flesh out.
I think that's going to be necessary. I don't think that we have figured out exactly how that's going to happen yet.
Okay.
Because there's not, unless it was something coming from central office, I suppose. Probably that's how it would happen, right, Dr. Harrison?
Yeah, and I think it's really just a matter of figuring out exactly what that looks like. I mean, I think that would be really helpful as guidance from this task force, because we have sort of a cross section of our, all of our stakeholder groups, and so I think that it would be really helpful to get some thoughts around what that communication looks like.
That's one of our ongoing challenges, especially in Reading, is communicating with people that are beyond just families in the school, which is what we're gonna have to be doing. And in this case, it's over 2 schools. So, or 2 towns. So that's that would go in one of our challenges boxes.
Perhaps that's a way, perhaps it's a way we can leverage the resources of this group where we can be helpful as opposed to duplicating the work or putting the burden on the administrative team, right? So perhaps that's where we all 23 of us can say, okay, this group can, governance and finance group, write this, to report what is going to be, what our efforts have been to the community. And then it's essentially, hopefully, perhaps just a copy paste or, spread it along to tell 2 friends, and at least that we can have the mechanism, and then each one of us in this group can have an assignment, so to speak, in an area in which we're engaged. So again, just a thought, but we can we'll definitely flesh out more.
That's a good idea.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
Okay. I'm sorry. Again, I'm coming to this as a parent, so I'm not used to all of this background from, stuff. So forgive me if this is a silly question that maybe you guys it's obvious to you guys, it's not to me. Why is communication a challenge in Reading?
Because we don't have a newspaper. And so like if there's something that is happening in the school, but we want more people to know about it than just the school families. We want people who don't have kids in the schools, who don't have kids at all, or it's hard for us to reach all of those people. So I know in Reading, we have a Reading Board of Education Facebook page.
Right.
But a lot of people aren't on Facebook. We don't have a newspaper anymore. So it's just, that's why it's an ongoing challenge. And there's, yeah, that's it.
Maybe through the libraries as well, in addition to social media.
That's a good idea. I know Reading puts out I don't know about Easton, but Reading puts out like an email blast, but I don't know, I signed up for it. I don't know if I'm missing them or if, I don't know how reliable it is, so.
Yeah, Easton has from the library as well. And Easton also has a diversity and inclusion task force at the government at the town level. And they're starting to meet regularly. So that may be another group that we reach out to in Easton.
Yeah, I just so that everybody knows, I've also been contacted by a couple other groups who are interested in being partnerships. The League of Women Voters wants to partner with us. And so they would also be able to communicate through their channels as well. And hopefully more. Okay, is there any more committee member comment?
Chris.
So a couple things. First, I wanted to piggyback on something that Cheryl said, which is that we are serving a governance function more so than a management function. I think that's particularly important for folks who aren't sort of school board veterans in this group to understand the difference a little bit, that we are working to help provide guidance to the boards in their governance function to then provide direction to the administration, not do the administration, not get into the schools and do the work. And it can be hard to kind of recognize where those lines are, but we just got to make sure that we're cognizant of that. And along those lines, it's also important to be cognizant of freedom of information laws, because you are now all members of a public agency. And as a result of that, there are certain things that you can only do while we're all meeting like this in public. These meetings are recorded. These meetings are open to the public. Anybody can come, see, observe. And so when Heather sends an email to everybody, you can't reply all with substance and things like that. So if you have any questions about that or you're concerned, talk to Heather or Rydell or to me or to John or to Todd, and we're all happy to answer those questions because they can be sort of difficult at the beginning. The other comment I would have, or 2 other comments. The first is for the next meeting, we should make sure that we're approving the regular calendar so that meetings in 2021 are regular meetings as opposed to special meetings. And then a substance question for Rydell with respect to the governance and finance function as one of the buckets. whether that would be where you would intend to put things of an operational nature, buses, physical facilities, school lunches, things like that. Okay.
Okay, is there any more committee member comments? Okay, then do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
John, do I have a second?
Second, just to make it confusing.
John Stinson. Okay, so meeting is adjourned at 7:29.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Check your emails.